Hello, 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 hello. Hi, everybody. Welcome, welcome, welcome. So good to see y'all today. All right. So today we're gonna do something a little different. There's been some changes that have come down the pike, and so I'm making some changes to what once was called midday message and meditation. I am now calling Heal Your Life with Dr. Cruz, because there comes a time in life where you and I have to step up to what we know we're being called to, right? We're being called to something greater. We're being called to something more. That there is something deeper inside of us that is trying to come out, right? And so today I am your example of what that looks like. And I'm like, ooh, right? Because I have been asked to speak on a topic today that I honestly feel unqualified to talk about. And so I'm very humbled to talk on this topic. And it is a topic that is very difficult for me. It's a huge responsibility, and it's one of grief and loss. And it is one of how do you deal with losing a child? Or how do you deal with the death of a child? So I want to talk about grief and loss today, right? So before we get into that, I just want to say welcome to Wednesday, Wildin' Out Wednesday, or Wacky Wednesday, or whatever you want to call your Wednesday. But whatever you call your Wednesday, put a positive spin on it. Give it energy, because we're in the middle of a week, and our week is not over. Our life is not over. Our evolvement is not over. Our evolution is not over. Our time here on earth has just started. Every day is a new beginning. Every day is a new beginning. And so you must have this understanding, this awareness that every day of my life is a new beginning. It's a new beginning. Even as we venture into discussing grief and loss, right? And so first I want to say we as humans, we use these words. And every word that we use has meaning. Every word we use has meaning. And the meaning is subjective. The meaning is subjective. So if I say the loss of a child, that has a particular feeling to it, right? Because we have a subjective understanding of what that means. If I say the death of a child, that has a different feeling, because there's a subjective understanding of what these words mean. If I say the transition of a loved one, or a transition of a child, even an adult child. So the child I'm talking about today is an adult child. And so as we think about that, as we think about the words that we use, I'm feeling like I need to pray before I go further. I feel like I need to pray, because this is a very, very delicate topic. One that I feel unqualified but called to address, right? We have to recognize that sometimes we feel unqualified, but we have been called to do something, right? So I just want to take a moment and just acknowledge God's presence among us. And I ask God to speak through me, because the truth is I am unqualified. I have not lost a child. I have not lost really much of anyone, because I grew up in foster care. So I didn't have family. I didn't have these emotional connections to people called family. not in the traditional sense, not in the sense that someone would who spent years and decades with someone. So I ask God to show his presence here today and to ease the hearts of people who are experiencing grief and loss. And grief and loss can show up in many, many different ways. The country has dealt with so much grief and loss, so much pain from every corner of the world. There is grief and loss every day, so much so that we were not created to deal with this level of grief and loss. And so today I want to recognize the grief and loss of having a child transition from human form into spiritual form, our original form, which is spirit. God, please provide us the safe space today to hold our feelings in a manner that does not overcome us, does not make us feel like we are helpless, but let us hold this feeling and this information and whatever comes up for us today in this session, in this meeting of minds and hearts. Let us be able to hold it in a spiritual context and release anything that doesn't feel comfortable for us, doesn't feel congruent for us, that we don't have to accept everything that's said here today, that it's just one person's opinion with a good-hearted intention, good heart intention. All right, in Jesus' name we pray for the healing of the parents of everyone who's lost or had the death or the transition of a loved one, specifically the person who's requested today's discussion. In Jesus' name, amen. Okay, I am back. So the first thing I want to say is, when we experience, so in this moment, let me first say, in this moment, understand that anytime you're talking to anyone about anything that is very sensitive to your own understanding and emotional state, to take it with a grain of salt, right? Everyone is individualistic, and we use words based on our own understanding and habitual, unconscious behaviors, right? We speak sometimes and we don't really think about how the words affect other people, because everyone has their own interpretation and their own feeling of how words land on them. So before we go into any communication about anything, whether it's related to grief and loss or related to paying the bills and getting children or to do homework or someone to help in the yard, the way we communicate with people, it's not what we're saying to them. It's how their brain is interpreting our words into their own understanding. So whatever I say today, understand that it's your interpretation of how you're receiving it, how your nervous system feels when you receive what someone else says, right? Because the communicator could have great intention, but we could receive it from a different place. So it's very important for us to acknowledge that. I go through this all the time with my daughter. I have great intention. I have, I'm trying to say something I think is useful to her. And, just yesterday she said, "Can you stop teaching all the time? Every time you talk to me, it sounds like you're teaching me something." And I said, "I'm not sure. I don't mean to do that. I'm just sharing, right, my perspective. I'm sharing something I think could be useful." But her perspective is, "I'm an adult. Stop teaching me stuff," right? So I have to take that into consideration. And that's critical for us to understand when we're communicating with anyone. So today, when we think about a parent, right? We think about a mother who has a child, and Every parent has a different experience and relationship with their child. And sometimes we start off great. We know how to mother. We know how to be a parent. We've had that training. And so we progress in a healthy manner, potentially with the support of external family members, right? And then there's other times that people have children and they start off not really knowing how to be a parent. So a lot of how we deal with the transition of our child has to do with so many things, not only the immediate experience of the transition of the child from human form into spirit form, or whatever each individual's belief is that happens after the physical body stops working, because that's another element to take into account. What do I believe happens after this point? Right? And so how we interpret what happens after that point, or how we interpret, even forget about what happens afterward in the afterlife, but how we interpret and deal with the transition of our child. And today we're talking about an adult child, has everything to do with how we feel we parented throughout the years, how we feel we communicated, how we feel we did our job as a parent. And so, and part of the grieving process and the recognition, how we understand and recognize the process that we have to go through today, is to also realize that what we're feeling has everything to do with how we feel we showed up in this parent-child relationship. Very, very important point to keep in mind, so that we know whatever we're feeling now that the situation has occurred, the transition has happened, whatever we're feeling, we get a better understanding of, why am I feeling this emotion? Does this go beyond just I'm sad and devastated and depressed because my child is not here in the physical form anymore? Is what I'm feeling just indicative of that? Or is what I'm feeling potentially guilt and sorrow, regret, shame? Are there other emotions showing up in this moment that have indication of what I feel about how I showed up in this relationship? Right? Because when we can feel, so let me just pause right there and say, we never truly, I don't think we ever truly heal, especially as a mother, from the loss, transition, or death of our child. But we're not supposed to, I don't think, right? So understanding that there's a certain level of feeling of incompleteness that will always be with us, right? Because something dramatic has happened here. The person is no longer physically with us. So how can we ever expect to feel the same as we did when the person was here? Right? So we have to understand it's two separate realities now. So it's okay to not feel completely healed, to not feel completely like the circle has completed itself and I've done a 180. I've healed myself, right? It's okay to understand that there's always going to be an element that is not fully healed. It's, but we don't have to live in pain. Even though my reality, it's a new normal, it doesn't mean I always have to live in pain. That there are things that are going to occur. I'm going to reinterpret the situation. I'm going to create a new relationship with my child, right? Just because my child is not here physically doesn't mean my child isn't here spiritually. Right? So I'm going to have a reinterpretation. I'm going to have a new understanding of how I relate to my child. Just because my child isn't here physically doesn't mean that I pretend I never had a child, right? I can still communicate with my child in spirit. So there's a lot of things that are going to happen and show themselves differently because my reality is different, right? So it's important to have the proper expectations of who am I, like what's okay for me now? Who am I going to become? And what's okay for me to show up as? Do I have to pretend? Do I have to show up with a smile every day? Like I've done a 180. Is it okay for me not to look happy? Can I accept myself in this moment as I'm grieving and know that something unfamiliar is going to come upon me? Something unfamiliar is going to be a part of my new reality. This unfamiliarness, because I've never been in this place before. I've never been in this place. This place is my new reality that I don't get to physically interact with my child anymore. And as I'm going through so many dynamic parts of trying to find the word for just being broken down, right? When our child is no longer physically here, I have, assumably, as a mother who loves their child, I have assumably been broken down to an element of existence that is not familiar to me. That this is the single most stressful thing I have ever encountered in life. That no one can truly understand what I'm experiencing, but maybe another mother who's experienced it, right? And maybe people can have compassion for me and they can hold me as I'm trying to figure out how to transition through this process called grief, right? There are stages to grief. There are stages to understanding, psychologically understanding the moment that I'm in, which changes from second to minute, from day to day and year to year. My psychological well-being is constantly being transitioned. My psychological well-being is transitioning from second to second. In this second, I could feel devastated because I have been broken down to an element of being that has never been revealed to me ever in life. I've never seen this experience in life. So how can I possibly understand how to psychologically deal with it? I don't. So that's going to change from second to second and minute to minute and day to day, because I'm becoming introduced to this new transition every day. It's new to me, so I can't get ahead of it. I can't heal yet because I have to go through these different transitions, and I have to psychologically experience what it is to go from minute to minute to second and day to day and week to week, right? Personally, I had a death in my family, and it wasn't even comparable on any level to losing a child. I still have my daughter physically. And what I experienced, I just want to stay in my proper place here, right? This is a very delicate situation, so please forgive me as I'm moving along through this with you, because I cannot even begin to understand what someone would be going through to not have their child here anymore. But the closest thing I can relate it to is the loss. I went overseas to work, and there was a loss in my family, and I felt responsible because I didn't put up the proper protective factors. And I left someone vulnerable in my family for this to happen. So when we think about the death of a child, we also have to consider, am I feeling guilt? Is part of the pain that I'm feeling guilt for something? This is really, really important to identify, because if we're feeling depression and pain and all of these biological and chemical reactions in our body, right? Because when we deal with death, we're not just dealing with the psychological understanding, we're dealing with a biological and chemical reaction in our nervous system, in our body. So we have all parts of us, right? We first have to understand, who am I as a human, and what parts of me as a human are responding to the death of this child. So what makes me, me, and what makes you, you, is we have a brain, we have a psychological understanding, we have a nervous system, we have a parasympathetic and a sympathetic nervous system. And the sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous systems control how we feel. And when we're in a moment of deep, deep grief, we're not psychologically attuned all the time to the moment. We're not really in control, because we have chemicals in our brain that are being released and communicating with our muscles and our bones and our cells. And it becomes overwhelming. Grief is overwhelming. It's not logical. We can't just logically move through this moment. We are being biologically and chemically controlled in this moment. So if you're feeling guilt about anything, if you're feeling shame about anything, if you're feeling confusion, if you're feeling just devastated, if you're feeling disassociated, if you're feeling lost, if you're feeling helpless, all of these feelings are natural to grief. And the good news is, you're not going to feel all of these feelings forever, because they are a chemical reaction to this grief period of your life, right? So there's hope there. We must hold on to hope. And so I want to remind you, as you're dealing with any moment of grief in your life, you must also remember there is hope. There is hope that I'm in a transition right now, that this is not forever. It feels like forever. The reality that my child won't be here physically, yes, that is forever. But how I feel in reaction to that is not forever. And if we can sneak that into our psychological understanding while we're biologically and chemically being controlled in this moment of grief, if we can just remember in our darkest moments, when we are alone and we are praying or screaming or angry and crying, if we can just have a glimpse that this is not going to feel the same way forever, then that can help us just transition incrementally into knowing that it's okay for me to feel all these feelings in this moment. I have to feel all these feelings because I must transition through this trauma that I'm experiencing. We are experiencing trauma when we're processing that someone was physically here and I could touch them and I could pick up the phone and talk to them and I could FaceTime them and I could see them on Facebook. And now I will never be able to do that again. That's traumatic. And so grief is a moment of trauma. And when we're in a traumatic situation, we must feel those feelings. And it's important to have some kind of environment where we can feel those feelings in a support element. And we get to decide what element that is, right? Sometimes family members superimpose themselves so that they make sure that we don't isolate and that we don't handle this by ourselves. Because how many of y'all know sometimes when we're grieving and we're deeply in pain, we don't want to see anybody. We don't want to open the blinds and we don't want to eat and we don't want to take our vitamins and we don't want to drink water and we don't want to exercise and we don't want to get sun. We want to just cry. Because our life is different. And it's devastatingly different. And it's important to recognize that is true. But with everything that involves destruction, there is a purpose. There is a transition. And there is a rebirth. And that rebirth is part of the purpose. Nothing stays the same. But can something else show up? Not to replace the relationship, but can something else show up that gives new meaning and new life and honor to the new form that my child has taken? Right? Can something come out of this traumatic, devastating moment that has rocked me to my core and has destroyed me as I know myself, as a parent, as a mother, and even as a father? Even in that destruction, can there be something beautiful that comes out of it on the other end? That's what gives us hope. That's what gives us a sense of understanding that I'm not going to live in this moment of feeling this psychological, biological, and chemical devastating trauma forever. But as I'm feeling these feelings, I must feel them. Because if I deny them, that trauma will show up in the future as something more harmful. Something that starts with stress. Something that starts with, I don't have patience, I don't have tolerance, I don't have the ability to hold on. Right? If we don't feel the feelings and process through them and recognize, why am I feeling sad? Because there are stages, right? There are stages while you're feeling the devastating emotions. That's all you're supposed to do in that moment. Just feel those devastating emotions. Be in that moment of grief. But that moment of grief can't last forever. And that's why we need the support system. The support system, and if you are watching and you're part of a support system for someone who's grieving, initially, there's nothing to say except for I'm here for you. Whatever you need, I'm here for you. When we're going through grief and trauma, we don't need solutions. We don't need a new normal. We don't need a new understanding. We don't need anything. Except for, if you're going to be in my presence while I'm grieving, then just hold me. Just hold me, because I got real pain that I've never known before. I've never been here before, and I need to feel this pain, because this is a relationship that has transitioned, right? And so although we can never compare anything to the transition of a child's physical form into spirit, we can understand, as other human beings who've never experienced that, we have experienced other deaths of what once was and will never be the same again, right? The transition that we go through when we're in a divorce, the transition we go through when we lose a different member of the family, right? Parent, an uncle, an aunt, a grandmother. All of that is still a transition. When we're the breadwinner of our household and we have lost our job, that's a transition. That's a traumatic transition for someone that had money to buy their family food and now they can't provide safety and food. That's a traumatic transition. To have anything one day and not have it the next. An animal. Anything that we're emotionally connected to. So we can empathize. We can empathize as a support system. That sometimes we don't need answers. We just need to connect neurologically and physiologically. Neurologically and physiologically. Because we are human beings having a spiritual experience. Right? And so this is not a logical moment. This is not something I need to process logically yet until I've spent time processing my emotions. And when the time comes, right? I remember back the example I was saying when I had the loss in my family. I was depressed for 3 weeks and I was by myself. I was working overseas, so I didn't have the support of anyone. And I didn't tell anyone what I was going through. I ended up taking it out on a friend that had nothing to do with anything. And I blamed it on my friend. And I said, you know I'm working overseas. Why aren't you checking on my family? And he was like, what are you talking about? I didn't know I was supposed to check on your family. Because when we're grieving, we're not making sense sometimes. We're not logical. We're emotional because of the chemicals that are flooding our body. Because second by second, and minute by minute, and day by day, we're a different person. We're experiencing this event differently in every moment. And so in that moment, I had gone from denial to anger, right? The 5 levels of grief, according to Kubler-Ross. Denial is your first stage. Anger is your second stage. Bargaining is your third stage. Depression is your fourth stage. And acceptance is your fifth stage. And I just want to add here that part of the reason I said I felt unqualified to speak on this is because I'm not trained in grief and loss. I'm not that kind of therapist. But I am a human being and I can relate. And I am trained as a therapist. So I understand the different parts of our body that are experiencing it. And I am a mother. So I feel like I can relate in these ways. All right. So right now, when I think about when I lost that member of my family, I was in my anger. And I took it out on my friend. So I want to remind you all, if you're experiencing trauma from grief and loss, look up Kubler-Ross, I think that's her name, Keebler. I know that's the name of the little cookie people, the Keeblers. That's a childhood memory that just popped up, I don't know. Can we laugh while we're feeling grief? That's a great point, right? Can we laugh? Yeah, we can laugh. Laughter is God's free medicine. And that's why we transition from second to second, moment to moment, day to day. We could be in a deep grieving moment and then all of a sudden bust out laughing. And it's okay. Because we also know that our loved ones, they don't want us to be sad forever. They don't want us to. Many people say, listen, when I die, don't grieve. Don't be sad. Don't cry. Don't mourn me. Please celebrate my life. Celebrate my life because I don't want you to hurt, right? This is a natural progression that everyone goes through. We're everything in existence, right? We come from this spirit world. So everything, every plant, every animal, every human being, every reptile, every vertebrae, everything, even inanimate objects, right? This paper will go from this, and if you leave it here long enough, it will disintegrate into nothingness, right? Everything has a beginning, a lifespan, and a transition period. And when our children transition, we have to know in our bones, in our blood, in our emotions, and every cell of our body, every atom, every proton, every neutron, every electron, every neuron, everything that composes us, that our children don't want us to suffer, and that they would rather us celebrate them and celebrate their life. And so they know, and we know, yes, there will be a mourning period. There will be a period where we have to acknowledge our emotions. But we can come out on the other side laughing and having memories and saying, I remember, right? We're going to start crying first. I remember when my child and I did X, Y, and Z. I remember when I took my daughter to this place. I remember when. And it's going to bring up tears and feelings of sadness because we're human. But please remember, you're also spirit. You're also spirit. So you can spiritually connect to the moment. And we're going to have a human response, which is crying or being sad. But we can also have a human response that we can laugh and say, man, we had a great time. Or when I saw my child perform, or when I saw my child do, for my daughter, she did the trapeze. I saw her on the trapeze once. And I remember seeing my daughter climb up the rock wall or whatever it's called, right? I took her camping once and we were with a group and she got on there and no harness and the wall wasn't extremely tall, but it was probably, 10 feet, not more than that, maybe 20 feet in the air. And she just climbed it like she was born to do that. And that was her essence. I saw the essence of her spirit, right? When we see our children, when we see the spirit of them. We see the spirit of our children. We don't just see their body. When my daughter smiles at me, I see the spirit in her. When she climbed that wall, I was like, wow, that's dynamite. And when you see your children, even the children that transitioned into the spirit world, when you remember, when you look at pictures, when you look at their Facebook page, when you look at videos of them, you are seeing their spirit. You're not seeing their body, right? Our eyes see that, but our bodies feel. Maybe I should rephrase it that way. We see them physically, but our body, what we're connecting with is their spirit. We're connecting with the spirit of our child, right? I was seeing my daughter climb that wall. I was like, wow, she's dynamite. But I was connecting with her spirit. That's what I was feeling. That's why I said, wow, she's dynamite. I wasn't impressed that she was just climbing the wall. Who cares, right? But it was the energy and the essence of her physicality and her movement and her agility. And I was like, wow. And when you look at your child on the video, on the Facebook thing, in a picture, in the memory, in the picture, in the movie of your mind, when you see your child there, you're feeling their spirit. And that is priceless. That's what we mourn. That's what we truly, truly, truly mourn. That we will never be in the presence visually to see the spirit of our child. And it's okay. Because it lives inside of us. And we're going to cry. Because it's sad. And in this moment, we can be sad. And in the next moment, we can say, God, I'm the luckiest person in the world. I got to spend time. I was picked to be the creator of that human being. And that is my gift that I didn't even deserve. Right? And it's okay to feel that too. We're going to feel it all. And then when we go through denial and anger and bargaining and depression, and we could feel each of those at the same time, or we could feel multiple things at the same time. Yeah. And just know it's a process of being human. None of us can escape it. Except for maybe the sociopath and the psychopath. But you don't want to trade places with them. It's better to feel what we feel. Because as you're saying, you're the luckiest person in the world. That was your child. That is my child. That is her child. That is his child. And if we only knew, and some of us do, how truly honorable it is to be a parent. I didn't know that. I was a 21-year-old parent. I didn't have my own parents. I had no idea the honor it was to be a mother. I had no idea the honor it was for that to be my child. I felt it, but I didn't understand it. Right? And so now here we are. Right? We understand. We are the luckiest people in the world. And whether we parented properly, which I didn't for most of my daughter's life. I did not parent properly. Whether we have to reconcile our feelings about what we did as a parent. And now there are things that we would like to say that maybe we'll never get to say to the physical person. I want you all to know that you can still speak to the spirit of your child. Because there are frequencies in this world that we can't see or hear, right? Dogs, for instance, can hear frequencies of noises that we as humans can't hear. We only have a range of frequencies that we can recognize through our brain. Right? Our ears don't hear. Our brain interprets and hears, right? It's bizarre. It's complicated. But there's a range that we hear as human. There's a range that dogs hear. There's a range that we hear when our trauma is activated that we cannot hear when we're stabilized. So there's also frequencies of things that dogs can see that we cannot see as humans. Right? And there are people that say that they can see things that the average person cannot see. They can see auras. They can see dead people. They can see different things, right? I don't know if that's true or not. I'm not one of those people. But, I have a family member that said she saw her dad after he transitioned, sitting on her bed, talking to her. And so was that an aberration or, some hallucination? I don't know. Maybe she was able to see him. So please know that you can always talk to your child. And just because you can't see them physically doesn't mean they're not there. They're just vibrating on a different frequency than we can as humans see or as humans hear. Okay. So the only thing that we don't have anymore is the physical person to interact with, right? But you have them spiritually to interact with. And that is very, very awesome to know. That is a great feeling to know that I talk to my dad. I can still talk to my dad, right? I can't hear him talk back to me, but I know without a doubt. What do they say in the law? Without a shred of doubt, or without a preponderance of doubt? I don't know. Without whatever it is, I believe without a shred of doubt that my father is in the spirit world. And I don't know if he can hear me, just like I can't hear him. Can he hear me? I don't know. Maybe spirits can't hear humans. But I believe he can feel what I'm saying. I believe that. I believe that feeling, what's the word? Like not transcends. Feeling transcends, right? That we can feel things intuitively. We can feel things through the spirit. We can feel things through our nervous system. We can feel, like, you ever walk into a room and you just have a feeling, right? I believe that we can feel things. Yeah. Very good, Patricia. Yeah. You speak to your son as long as you want. The important thing is not to lose your reality. We have to remember that we still are human and we have to function in this reality. But you can absolutely talk to your son anytime that you want to. And whether people understand it is of no consequence to you. That's not your problem. You get to talk to your son anytime you want. Okay. So I just wrote some things down before I started because I wanted to make sure that I went over them. So keep in mind, while we're grieving, sometimes we can't do everyday tasks. We're not going to probably clean the kitchen. And everybody's different. Maybe they will. Maybe that will be the thing that helps them get through their trauma, that they do clean their whole house. But sometimes when people are depressed, they don't clean. They don't want to wash clothes. They don't want to cook food. So if you have a support system, or if you guys watching are a support system ever in your life, know that when someone's grieving, do those things for them. Come over their house, cut their grass, take their trash out, wash their dishes, cook them some food. Because physiologically, we don't have the strength. Our body sometimes just doesn't have the strength to do anything but lay there in depression. And depression is okay, guys. It's okay for us to feel depressed. We have a range of emotions as humans that it's okay to feel. Don't block your emotions. Don't block your feelings. Because if you don't feel them now, it's going to show up later as stress or addiction or anger or intolerance or lashing out or self-harm or suicide ideations or body dysmorphia or eating disorder, So what we don't deal with, it doesn't disappear. It just shows up in a different way later. Okay? So if you can't do your everyday tasks, don't be hard on yourself. Just know, try to call out for some help. Ask your mother, father, sister, brother, cousin, neighbor, someone, church member, pastor, someone on Facebook, whatever it is you need, ask. Okay? Because sometimes other people can't read our minds, right? So they can't read your mind. So just make sure your needs are known. And if you're not a member of a church, just pick a church and call them and say, hey, I'm going through this situation and I need help. Any church worth its we say their weight in gold, but any church worth their connection to the spirit world, I don't know how to say that, whatever, you know what I mean. Any church worth anything, they're going to come help you. They're going to come help you. Okay. Maybe you could ask a friend for a referral to their church. Remember that you are psychologically, biologically, emotionally, and socially being affected. And neurologically, right? Neurologically, psychologically. Psychologically means basically how you're processing it through your thoughts. Neurologically is how your brain is functioning at this time. Physiologically is how your brain interacts with your body and how your nervous system is now responding. Socially is how you're performing or showing up in the world in your relationships, right? So for 3 weeks, I didn't talk to anybody except for the friend that I got angry at. Find meaning in your struggle. So one way that I find meaning in all of my struggles, even when my dad passed and my other family member passed, the way I found meaning is I chose to take on this belief that I was going to honor them. That even if I didn't honor them while they were alive, even if I didn't wasn't the best person I could have been in their life while they were alive, I was going to honor them from now on. That I was going to show up as a person of excellence, and I was going to be a representation of the greatness that I wish I could have been while they were physically here. Right? The things that I wish I could have done and said with my dad, I can't do that anymore, but I can do that with other people. I can be the voice and the ear and the laughter and the friend for other people. I can show up as that person that I wish I could have been for him and do that for other people. And so the meaning that I give this moment is I'm going to become a better person, and I'm going to love people in honor of my father's memory, in honor of my other family members' memory. I'm going to be the best person I can be, because I know that would make them proud. Even because I failed that family member. I left that family member vulnerable. I didn't put the safety precautions up to protect them. And that was my fault. The death of that family member was my fault. And I had to own that. But I did spend a period of time mourning that and asking for forgiveness, right? And then I spent a lot of time in my imagination seeing that family member happy and enjoying themselves and remembering them at their best. And taking the responsibility that I'm sorry. In my spirit world, I apologize to them in my imagination. And your brain cannot distinguish between a lived experience and an emotionally imagined one. So my body was responding with forgiveness, self-forgiveness, as I was apologizing in my imagination to my family member and taking full responsibility. I had to put that out there to ask for forgiveness, because had I not, that would have haunted me long term, right? So if there's anything that you feel guilty of, make sure you bring it into the spirit world, imagining having a conversation with your loved one and asking for forgiveness, and go through that mourning piece, right? That grief piece, because that's a separate piece than grieving the physical loss of a person, right? We will bounce back. We will recover. Again, we're not going to look identical to what we did when they were alive, because there's a major part of us that's changed. There's a major part of our life that's missing. It will never be the same again. And so we should not be the same again. Don't expect yourself to be the same again, because that's an expectation that's unrealistic, right? But you can be your new self, which can even be better, right? It can even be better. Physical symptoms. Look out for physical symptoms. Physical symptoms of grief. When we're grieving, we're stressed. When we're stressed, we can have physical symptoms. Physical symptoms of grief and stress could be physical symptoms such as stomach aches, headaches, irritable bowel syndrome, anxiety, I don't know. I'm not a medical doctor, so whatever medical stuff you can think of, there might be some physical somatic symptoms, right? Muscle ache. When I was under duress for a long period of time, I held my stress unconsciously. I didn't know I was holding my stress in my shins. So I had severe shin splints for years to the point where I couldn't put my foot on the gas pedal for more than a few seconds because it was pulling my muscle in a manner that was debilitating. So I would have to switch putting my right foot, you drive with your right foot on the pedal, and then I would have to lift that up and put my left foot, and then lift that up and put my right foot, because my stress was showing up as a physical ailment, and I didn't know that that's what was happening, right? Take care of yourself, right? Yes, when we're depressed, we don't feel like taking care of ourselves. But as you transition, and I'm going to wrap up here, as you transition through your grief, give yourself permission to love yourself. Give yourself permission to start with water. Just hydrate yourself, right? Take your vitamins, because your body gets depleted of very important basic nutrients when we're under duress and stress, right? So we want to replenish when we can get back to homeostasis. Start replenishing, start taking your vitamins, drink your water, open the blinds, little by little, right? Little by little, whatever you can handle in the moment. But start taking care of yourself again. Write letters to your loved ones that have transitioned into the spirit world. Dance with them. Put on some fun music to change your physiology. Yeah, anytime you need to change your physiology instantly, put on a song that you love, that makes you feel good, that makes you want to dance, that makes you brighten up, right? And put a smile on your face. Right? And so it's okay to dance in your living room with your son, right? The imagination that your son is there, and you're just dancing to this great song that makes you feel good, and you're having this imaginary moment with your son, and you're dancing with him. Or play cards. It's okay. If you want to play Uno or whatever and pretend that your son is there. You can have moments with your family members. The thing is you don't want to lose yourself in that dissociated state. You want to remember that you come back to reality. But we can absolutely have time. If I'm having a meal and I want to pretend my father is with me, I can do that. Why not? I can have my food and be like, hey, Dad, I had a tough day. I wish you were here. Man, I could really use a hug from you today. And I could just be eating and talk to him like, man, do you, in the spirit world, what are you doing? What do y'all do over there, You can have a conversation. It's okay, right? It's okay. In time, this will dissipate, right? But it allows you to still have a connection with them while they're physically not here. And then one day, as you transition through acceptance, you don't need to do that as much, right? You take on the new meaning. You find new purpose. Maybe you open a nonprofit in your father's name, or in your child's name, or in whoever's name it is, right? And you make a difference, a positive difference in someone else's life, right? So for any mother that has had a child who transitions, you all could create a support group, mothers of transition children. And you all have experienced something that nobody else in the world has, and nobody else can truly relate to. And so it's okay to be friends together, because you all can support each other and speak each other's language. And that's how you find new meaning in life. And then you all could do events. You could do fundraisers for other people who have lost their children, and to be able to support them so that you all can buy them food when they're grieving, and send somebody over there and give that person a wage for the day, to physically be with the person who's grieving, because the person who's giving the support still has bills. So, they still need money. Bringing awareness, right, on how to grieve properly. And each of you could tell your own individual stories about how you got through it. And that can help the other people listening to say, oh, man, I never thought about that. I could do that. I could think differently. I could interact with other people. I could open a nonprofit. I could create a cause. Whatever the aha moment is from the individual speaking their own stories. It's important for us to give value to our experiences, right? All right, so I'm going to, I'm going to stab myself with a cross. No, that hurt. I'm going to wrap up here. I feel good. I feel good about how I presented and what I delivered here today. I hope I have honored you all. I've honored you. You're in my heart. You're deeply loved and cared for. If by no one else, then by me. And I am with you. And I'm always here for you whenever you need me. Okay? All right. So put on that song. Put on that good music. Take your vitamins. Go get you some water. Go, go cry if you need to cry. Go journal. Go do whatever it is you need to do. Honor yourself. And know that second by second, moment by moment, day by day, week by week, year by year, you're going to transition from period to period, identity to identity, feeling to feeling. And it's all okay, because we're just human and we're trying to figure it out. We're adaptive beings, so make sure you adapt, okay? Don't allow yourself to stay in depression. If you're depressed for more than a month, if you're grieving, let me say it that way, if you're grieving for more than a month, then I highly recommend you reach out, okay? Maybe reach out earlier. Always have that support system. But if you're feeling like something's extending abnormally beyond a month, please reach out for some clinical medical help, okay? So you don't have to do it alone. It's okay to take medication to transition through a period, right? To get through a moment. We don't have to be on medication forever, but sometimes in this moment, I might need some medical help. That's okay too. Okay. All right. Bye guys. I love you. Hi everybody. Hi. Thank you, my love. You guys have a great day. I'll see you Friday. Okay. Bye-bye.